Hey, welcome to Two Doctors Homestead. My name's Daniel, and this is another edition of Two Doctors Prepping. Wanted to talk about a few common prepper terms and some of the kind of the ideas behind them and dig into that a little bit. We just did the video on the 3Bs, really looking at how you can focus your preps, as well as a video on some emergency supplies you might want to have on hand in the event of any kind of emergency, and really a lot of those are great for just regular everyday situations. So these are a little more on the prepper side, but I think they're important to understand not just what the terms mean, but kind of dig into them a little bit and give you some of the ideas behind them. And we're going to talk about GHB and BOB. So GHB, the idea is a get home bag, and I made a video a little while back on your get home plan, and really if you're away from home, there's a possibility something could happen that could kind of strand you there. I know I had to go out of town for a week in Austin, and found out the week later the people that had to go that next week, I went, we'll call it the third week, they went the fourth week, they got stranded, right? There was a big ice storm, power was out, they were stuck in their hotels, couldn't go anywhere, and actually power went out in the hotel. So it is possible to get stranded somewhere. It happens in bad weather, and it also happens during extreme events. If you look at September 11th, people got stranded, right? All the airlines shut down. We had an event more recently where they were having computer problems and the airline shut down. So it is possible to get stranded somewhere. So the idea behind the GHB, the get home bag, is that you have a bag prepared with things you might need in the event that you have to walk home, right? What you need in the bag really depends on a lot of factors, and we'll kind of dig into those factors more than, say, individual items you might put in the bag. But look at how far you travel on a regular basis, whether you're, how far is work for you. Some people it might be 10 minutes, 15 miles. It could be an hour, could be 50 miles, 60 miles. Look at how far you frequently are away from home, and just ask yourself, if I had to get home from here, if something happened, doesn't have to be an EMP, but certainly that's on the list. You see what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, you see what's happening between the alliances building between Russia and China, you see the threats from North Korea of, hey, we're gonna get ready for nuclear war. EMP is not impossible, right? I'm not saying be afraid of an EMP or be prepared for an EMP necessarily, but be prepared to get home. End of the day, we all want to get home, right? So I would look at it from that perspective. If you're at work and you couldn't drive home for whatever reason, your car didn't work, if you're on a trip and you can't just get home, and you have to walk, right? Assuming you're able to walk, right? If not, your get home bag is going to be more complicated. How long is that going to take you? Is it a day? Is it 2 days? Is it 3 days? What would you want to take with you if you had to walk home? If it's a day or two, your get home bag, do you plan on spending the night somewhere? Right? Do you have places along the way you could stop to spend the night? Or are you going to set up a camp, right? Are you going to sleep under a bridge? Do you want a sleeping bag? What's the weather like? And that's really where it gets hard to tell you what to have in a get-home bag, because it really depends a lot on where you're at, what the climate's like, what the geography's like. Is it in the winter? Is it in the summer? If it's in the wintertime, I said I lived and worked in the Loop in Chicago for a long time, and we had negative 40-degree wind chill in the winters. That's a much different camping trip than, say, a regular summer day in Arizona where it's 120 out, right? So it's a different camping trip, and what you would need for that walk, whether it's a day walk or even a 2 or 3 day walk, right? If you can get on MapQuest and there's an option, or I guess it's not MapQuest anymore. Yeah, I'm just old, right? You get on Google Maps or you get on the maps on your phone and you just hit the walk button just for the fun of it, and it'll tell you how long it thinks it's going to take you to walk, and a lot of that depends on how often you walk and your physical health and whatnot. But if it's 3 days, if it says 3 days, then go with 3 days in your mind. Maybe add a little buffer time. We'll call it 4 or 5 days. What would you need to survive for 4 or 5 days? Is that certainly some water? You're going to want to drink some water on this walk. You might want to have some food available on this walk. And we'll look at some easy kind of portable survival type food items here. It doesn't have to be. It could be some power bars, right? It could be a bottle of water and some power bars. What kind of shoes do you normally wear on a regular day? Are they dress shoes? Are you wearing high heels? Are you wearing the kind of shoes you're going to want to walk in for 3 days? And if not, maybe your get-home bag, you put a comfortable pair of shoes in there. You put a nice pair of socks in there. Do you need extra clothes? Well, once again, that depends. That depends on the weather. I wouldn't necessarily bring a whole set of extra clothes just for hygienic purposes if I want to wear clean clothes on my 3-day walk. But if there's weather issues you have to contend with, if it's going to be raining, if you're in an area that rains, maybe you want a poncho, maybe you need a jacket, maybe you need a sleeping bag, right, and a tent. I mean, you have to think about how far that walk is and what it would take for you to do that walk. So that's really the idea behind a get-home bag. You may want to include self-defense options in that bag. I think there's a lot of stuff that you might see in the prepper sites that maybe you don't need in the bag, but just some basic things you think about. I'm here, I'm going to walk it. Okay, shoes, and then it's too far to walk in one day, so I'm going to have to sleep somewhere, maybe a emergency tent, maybe a sleeping bag. Going to need some water or a life straw, or water and a life straw, right? Start thinking of it from that perspective. Is how far do you have to go to get home from where you're at? And if you're someone that takes long business trips, once again, what does it take to get home from there, right? And that might be much more complicated. And even basic stuff like cash. Do you have cash on hand? You see a potential financial collapse coming if you have to get home and your bank card doesn't work. Do you have enough cash? Are there hotels along the way? Right, you just have to start thinking about those things, and it's a lot easier to plan and think about it now rather than wait till you're stranded somewhere and say, okay, how am I getting home now? What am I going to do now? That's not the time to start working on that plan, right? So I think it's a good idea to have at least a get-home plan, but depending on your situation, maybe a get-home bag. Maybe get a bag. It doesn't have to be the latest fancy tactical backpack. It could be a trash bag, and throw a couple of those things in there and just keep it in the car. Right, or take some extra items on a suitcase with you when you travel, in case you need to walk home. Right, so we talked about the get home plan. So that's the GHB. That's the get home bag. The next item you hear a lot about is the BOB, the bug out bag. We're getting out at Dodge, and bugging out's complicated, and I see people in the prepper groups talk a lot about it. What's your bug out plan? I look at bugging out in two ways, right? It's, obviously you want to you feel that there might be a situation where you need to leave home, right? And I can give an example of that, and I mentioned it in a previous video. When I was living up in Chicago, working in that area, I worked with a guy that lived in Wisconsin, and he did the commute down to Chicago for work, and there was a big riot in Wisconsin, and that was happening outside his house, and it really kind of made him and his family uncomfortable when there's a riot going on outside your house, and they knew police assistance was not guaranteed, right? And that seems to be happening a lot in a lot of places in the world right now. Is police assistance not guaranteed? It's not the focus of the video, but at what point do you bug out? You're saying, you know what, this just isn't safe here anymore, and people bug out for storms and whatnot all the time. So you look at, okay, am I going to bug out? Well, there's, as I said, two kind of scenarios of bugging out. Is, do you have a place to go? Right, and that could be a cabin in the woods. Maybe you have a lake house. Maybe you just have a friend that's going to let you crash on his couch, and he's one town over. Or, a couple of doctors in the countryside. They're going to let you come stay in their guest room, right? Do you have a place to go? And if you have a place to go, your bug out bag really is sort of a get home bag. You think about, what do we need to get there? How far is it? right? Is it days? Is it weeks? Obviously, your first plan for most folks is going to be, I'm going to drive there, right? So you look at what would it take to drive there. Do you need extra gasoline? Can you get there on one tank of gas? And you start kind of playing different scenarios around getting there, which is to say your first option is your car. What if there's a financial collapse? What if there's a grid down? What if you can't assume the gas stations are going to be an option? So if this is a long trip, maybe an extra 5 gallons of gasoline you can rotate it out. What do you need to do that drive? And then what would you need to do that walk, right? How far of a walk is? And it starts to overlap with the get home bag. It's the bug out bag to get to that location. Food, water, clothing. Do you need temporary shelter for the trip? Right, you can start thinking about that ahead of time where you're going to go. So the other side of the bug out you see people talk about is it's not safe for bugging out, but we don't have anywhere to go. Right, and that's a much different bug out. That's I'm going to go live in the woods, naked and afraid style, or alone. I'm just going to go hide out in the woods. If you're going that route, that's a different equipment loadout, right? You kind of going to take as much as you possibly can because you don't have anywhere to go, and you're going to go set up temporary residence somewhere under a bridge, right? At that point, there was a power outage in New York a long time ago, and people kind of got trapped in the town, and they had to get out. And it falls back into the get home. But if you're bugging out to nowhere, you're a refugee at that point. Maybe you're homeless at that point, and you've got your car. If that is your plan, right, and maybe for some people that's the best plan you have. You live in an apartment in the city. You see in New York now, I mean, the public safety has set out, flyers about what to do if there's a nuclear attack, right? And you've got Iran, I think as early as last year, threatening to nuke New York. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if you're in that situation where you live in a major city and something bad happens, it could be an earthquake in San Francisco, obviously you bug out. Right, you bug out, and that's where you get the idea of a 72-hour bag, which is similar to a get-home bag or a bug-out bag, but that's basically just a bag with 72 hours of survival gear in it, food and water and shelter and whatnot. And you can get those online. You can find those on Amazon, and maybe we'll put some links in the Prepper YouTube or Amazon store. You can find 72-hour bags ready to go. You can build your own 72-hour bag. That can work as a bug-out bag, right? I mean, you could certainly keep it with you as a get-home bag. You could keep it in the corner as a bug-out bag that if you have to leave home, if there's an evacuation, if there's a chemical spill in your neighborhood, right? We could do this all day of all the horrible things happening right now that might cause you to have to bug out. Once again, just like getting home, just like anything else, think about it now. Don't wait until it happens. Right now, I'm not telling you to live in fear. I'm not telling you to spend all your money on equipment you don't need. These things don't have to be expensive. What am I talking about? A couple power bars, a bottle of water, a comfortable pair of shoes, right? And you can build from there. But if you're in that place and you're thinking, hey, what's my bug out? What's your bug out plan? Where are you going to go? And if you don't have anywhere to go, that's where you're talking your serious bug out bag, right? And maybe it's time to make friends in other towns if you can, right? That's not always an option. But that's bug out, right? That's your bug out bag. That's your bug out plan. That's your get home bag. It's your get home plan. So there's a lot of scenarios. There's a lot of stuff going on. We're seeing the possibility of financial collapse, and the government is doing what they can. And by the government, I'm not just talking about the U.S. government. You see, and financial institutions everywhere doing what they can to keep things going. And certainly, we all hope things continue to go well. You see the war in Ukraine, and we're all hoping that doesn't get worse, right? So, we're all hoping it doesn't get worse, but there is a lot going on right now, so it's not a bad time to start thinking about some plans, right? What happens if you're trapped and you got to get home? What happens if you're trapped? Or if home's no longer an option, how do you bug out? So thank you for watching, and we appreciate you.